Hi everyone, my name is Bob van Riek and I'm Product Manager for CGE Risk. In this video I'm going to show you some of the new functionality that we have built for you in version 10.2 of BowTieServer. The three topics that you will learn about are the barrier review, the list profiles and the new bowtie element codes that we have added in the latest version. So let's start with the barrier review and take a look at why you would want to use this. With the barrier review, you can periodically review the effectiveness of your barriers while being presented with all of the relevant context and have BowTieServer guide you through the process. Now let me show you how to do that in the software. From the main user interface of BowTieServer, you will need to navigate to one of your hazards to plan your barrier reviews. You can get there, for example, via reports, the hazard register, and then click on the name of one of the top events related to your hazards. You will find all of the reviews related to this hazard here under Reviews, which I'm currently highlighting with my mouse cursor. You would find any of the hazard reviews, which are more high level, but also the barrier reviews. Currently, you see that there's two quarterly barrier reviews in view. The first one is planned for the 1st of July this year, and the second one has already been completed on the 6th of April. Probably that was the review for Q2, and the other one is the review planned for Q3. So let me first show you how to add a new barrier review cycle. By clicking Add, you can first give it a name. For example, the quarterly barrier review. You can give it a longer description detailing any specifics about this review cycle that you're planning. And you can give it a due date. For example, if I want to start on the first date of Q2 this year, I select the 1st of April and I'm going to repeat it every quarter. And you can see that you can repeat your barrier reviews either never, so it's a one-off, monthly, quarterly, every half year, every year, and every 2 years. So in this case, we're going to select quarterly so that it will come back on the 1st of April, July, etc. So the review owner is the person that's going to be prompted that the review is due and is also in the lead of the process. In this case, I'm going to keep it on my own name, but you could also search and select other users with the right permissions to be the owner. You can list any other participants that you require for this quarterly review. For example, I need Marco in there every month and I need John in there every time. And maybe a more generic name, I need another subject matter expert on the topic. So the difference between a hazard review and a barrier review is the checkbox that you see here. So to plan a barrier review, I check the box and hit OK. I'm immediately taken into this review, but I can also take a step back into the hazard again, look at the list, and we can now see that we had a completed one. There was one planned for 4th of July, but there's also a review that I just planned, which is already overdue because the 1st of April has passed. Let us use that one for the rest of the example. So by clicking on the name, you can take it into the main screen of the review, and this just gives you an overview of the details that you entered earlier and all the barriers that you're going to do in this review being part of the hazard. The buttons at the top allow you to either edit your details, go back to your hazard, see all the reviews related to the hazard, to complete the barrier review, which is a bit premature now, we have to still perform it, and you can delete it if you have the right permissions. So let's go into some barriers to actually perform the review and click on this button. As you can see, all the barriers related to the hazard are displayed, parented by their scenario line, threats and consequences. The software will display some of the main properties of your barriers to have as context. It will show you the current effectiveness rating And it will also show you the status of your review by showing you whether you've selected a new effectiveness rating, whether you left any remarks, and whether that barrier has been reviewed or not. So this is basically your overview screen. Now to start going into the actual review, you have to click on one of the barrier names. So let's start with the first one. So this barrier is currently, based on the last review or the barrier design, in a poor state as indicated here. Now if we scroll a bit lower, we can see all of the relevant information related to this barrier. So apparently we've got 2 audit questions or inspection questions related to the barrier, and the N is 7 and all is green, so apparently very good results on the audits or inspections. But we also have 1 incident analysis where this barrier was involved and it was classified as unreliable. In this case it means that that barrier worked, but it's very unsure if it will work again in the future under the same conditions. Basically we were lucky that the barrier saved us, but we cannot really rely on it for future events. So this is not a positive sign, although the barrier did function. If there are any outstanding action plans for this barrier, you would find them under actions. And you can also review any of the previous historic field level changes that were made to this barrier. So this is basically the creation of the barrier. Then we had another instance where it was already degraded from good to poor by Fabian on the 6th of April, etc. So you will find any of the history here. Now, of course, based on this information and any other information you have or can dig up about this barrier, you need to make a decision going forward. And in this case, let's assume that we have sufficient information to state that the barrier effectiveness is actually in a good state. So up until the next review, we will take credit for this barrier, saying we can rely on it because it's healthy and it's functioning as intended. And it might also have to do with this unreliable event being solved and the barrier being fortified or improved. So based on good audit results, following up of incident recommendations, this barrier is now in a good state. So you basically leave a remark to substantiate why you made the change to the barrier state. From here, we can either save it and go out of the barrier review, do something else and come back later, or go to the next barrier, which is basically save and forward. So let's do that and do one more. If I click next, I am presented with the next barrier on that same scenario line. This is the breath alcohol ignition interlock device. Again, let's look at some of the information we have available. So we have it involved in one of the incidents we had about road safety and the barrier was missing. We have quite a lot of audit results and only some negative, but a lot of positive. Of course, we can go into these specific results to dig up all the details about it and then make a decision. But basically, we have to make a decision now. So it was missing in an incident. We've got a few negative audit results. So based on any of the business rules that we have as a company has set, we can say, let's keep it at poor, let's move it to very poor or do something else. And in this case, I'm going to keep it as poor. So I'm going to give some explanation on why I don't do any changes to the barrier effectiveness here. So after that, I'm going to save it and I'm going to go back to the barrier overview to show you what you will see then in your, let's call it the progress overview report. You can see that we've now covered 2 barriers. The first one moved from poor to good, second one stayed at poor. We can view any of the remarks we have given by hovering our mouse and getting a tooltip, and we can see that the status of these is reviewed. So basically we are 2 barriers into our full barrier review. And from here, it's just a matter of continuing the exercise, making a change or not to the barrier effectiveness, giving your remarks, and after you have done all of them, you can go back to your main view of this barrier review and you can complete it. So of course you will do this after you've done them all. So clicking complete will give you one last option to actually list the right participant. So the subject matter expert that we had involved here is actually Paul, so we can give his name. John was unavailable, so we didn't include him, and basically that's it. We can leave any remarks. We did not review all of the barriers, but will do so next quarter. Of course, this is following the fact that I have a very incomplete barrier review now, but probably you will have a full review and get it done in one go. So hitting OK will close the barrier review. Now going back to the hazard and looking into all of the reviews, we can now see that this review I just completed is complete, and because it's a quarterly review and I started at the 1st of April, there's a new one planned already for the 1st of July now. You can always go back into your reviews by clicking it, seeing the remarks, but also going into the actual barriers and see all the changes made to the effectiveness and review the remarks. So for now, this is what we have built for barrier reviews. Obviously, there's a lot of ideas how we can improve this in the future, so we also welcome your ideas. But for now, I wanted to keep it at this and move on to the next topic of this instruction video, which is going to be the list profiles. Now, the list profiles will really improve the way you interact with the various registers in BowTieServer. They will help you quickly get the information you are looking for on your screen. Because before, you had to reapply filters every time you entered a BowTieServer register. And additionally, the columns on display would be default, even if they were empty or contained irrelevant information. There was no way to change the way the profile looked. So what the list profiles allow you to do is to save your filter settings, but also to choose which columns to show or hide and how you want to sort the list you are looking at. It's possible to save multiple display profiles for each of the registers, and they are available for all of your colleagues so that you're all looking at the same information in the same way. Now let me show you how that works in the software with a quick instruction. Now the list profiles can be found throughout BowTieServer in many areas where you will find a register or a list. The place that holds most of the registers is of course the reports, where the hazard register is a very popular register to look at. So let's try our new list profiles in the hazard register. You will recognize the new functionality by the drop-down and the button that I'm now highlighting on the far right of the screen. Any current display profiles that you have already stored before are accessible through here. For example, all hazards, draft bowties, or all my vapor explosion bowties with a high risk. But let's start afresh with an empty drop-down, which means we're now looking at the default view, which is unfiltered and is showing all of the columns available in the database. Now, if I want to add a new profile, it's a matter of clicking Add New Profile and giving it a name. Now, for example, I want to have a good look on all the bowties that are currently under review and have not been accepted yet. So bowties under review would be my name. If I like, I can set this to a default so that everybody entering the hazard register always gets this view first. Now, in this case, that doesn't make sense because it's a very specific profile. Second, I can start to show or to hide columns. So by default, they're all visible. But for example, the effects column is empty, we don't have any data, and maybe the accountability is important, but the type is not important for this specific view. So I'm just removing that column to give a bit more space for the other data to be on screen. Now, another one that I might not want to look at is the inherent risk matrix values. So I'm going to uncheck all of those boxes and hit OK. Now, I removed columns, I gave a name to the profile, but most important thing is the filtering on the under review bow ties, which I still have to apply. You can do that via the well-known filter button. Look for the right property and select the right value, in this case under review. You can also multi-select, of course, if that makes better sense. Hit OK. So now the filter is applied, and the only thing left for me to do is to save the current filter settings into the profile. So save filter says the profile filter will be overwritten by the current filter settings, which is exactly what I want. So hit OK. And from now on, we have now stored a profile called bowties under review, which you can re-access anytime. So if I would go out of the reports, maybe go out of the whole session and close my laptop and restart it, go into reports, hazard register, by default it's the view showing you all, but I can now go to my bowties under review, which is filtering down and hiding the columns I deselected. I can go to my all hazards, which is another view I saved, my draft bowties, etc. This is how it works. Now, if you would want to change any of this, there's a few options, of course. Maybe draft bowties is not relevant anymore. I can just delete the profile if I have permission to do so, which is not a topic for this instruction video. So delete. But maybe I want to change the all hazards view because the build phase is still relevant, but the hazard code is not relevant to us anymore in this view. So I can edit the profile. I can remove the hazard code, and maybe I want to make this the default view. So hit the default checkbox. Now click OK. So from now on, this is saved into the all hazards profile. So anytime I move out of it and come back to it, you can see that the hazard code is gone. And that's basically what we're looking for here. So I think this concludes it. To summarize, you can add new profiles, you can edit existing profiles, you can override the filter settings of a profile by the Save Filter button, or if you have the right permission, you can delete a profile. And of course, all the other typical registers that you would expect this functionality to be found, it's also available there. So the consequence register gives you this functionality, your observation register gives you this functionality. So just have a look around and see where you find it. There's a few exceptions where it's not available, and that's because the nature of these lists are different, and there's not a good use case to have the profiles there. But typically anywhere you would expect the profiles to be present, you will find them. And this concludes the explanation on list profiles. Next up is the barrier element codes, bowtie element codes, I must say. So bowtie element codes is quite fundamental, of course, to the software and the way you reference to bowtie elements such as threats, barriers, consequences, hazards. Now, a few of the element codes were missing, so we added them in bowtie XP, and obviously then they are available in BowTieServer as well. So it's for the use case that you want to have codes defined for all of your elements in the database so that you can easily cross-reference maybe with other risk-related data you have in other systems, like the threat.1 appears in a bowtie, but it might also be a threat present in a HAZOP study that you want to link it to. So then a code is a typical way to do so. Now let me show you where you will find these element codes in BowTieServer. Now the barrier element codes have to be populated in bowtie.xp via the typical editor window that you will find there. After you have entered your codes in bowtie.xp, you will find them, of course, in your BowTieServer views in numerous places. For example, in the web viewer, where for threads, the code field is now visible as displayed here. It's also visible on the diagram, but also in the pop-up window. We added the same code field for consequences, and we did the same thing for escalation factors. And in this case, it's empty because there's no code set for this escalation factor. Now, if you would navigate to the same views in BowTieServer 10.0, so the previous version, the code field would not be visible at all, and it would just start with the name because the field was not available in the database for populating. Now, that concludes today's session. Hopefully, this last edition will also help you more easily cross-reference from the bowtie data into other IT systems related to risk, such as your external risk register, maybe a HAZOP study, and others. So thanks a lot for your time and have a nice day.